Good morning and good afternoon, and welcome to another episode of Random Trek. I am your faithful, fearless Captain Christopher Ingle, and as always, joined by my loyal commander who just got back from Risa on shore leave and brought me a Horgon. I don't know what to do with it, but Commander Brennan, the mystical Mar. Brennan, what am I supposed to do with this?
Well, I don't know, but I did stop by Andoria on the way back. It's really cold, but the Aenar are kind of cool people.
I hear
And
the
speaking
Aenar are
of
very
Andor,
awesome. Oh, always connected to that
wrong podcast.
other star universe. But today we finally, 6 months into this journey, we get to take one final leap with the original Enterprise crew in Star Trek VI, The Undiscovered Country. This captain's personal favorite of all the original series. But we are not alone. We are blessed. We are just highly excited to have our special guest. Brennan, this was your idea. I'll let you introduce him.
All right, everyone. We are pleased to be joined by none other than the President of the United Federation of Planets himself. He is the co-host of Enterprise Incidents, which is a podcast I cannot recommend highly enough. He is a member of the Producers Guild of America, a member of the Critics' Choice Association, a member of SAG, a movie critic, an all-around Star Trek expert. It is the one, the only, you guessed it, Scott the Movie Mantz.
Oh, thank you, fellas.
Mr. President, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Brandon and Chris, for having me on this excellent podcast, Random Trek. I'm very, very excited to get into Star Trek VI, The Undiscovered Country, the last of the original series movies to feature the entire cast. Of course, we had one more, which was kind of like a footnote, which is a whole other conversation on Generations. But Star Trek VI, The Undiscovered Country, brought the original series crew out on a very high note. And I have to say, thank goodness for that.
Yeah, it was a great way to go out, and just as film fans as we are, it's so rare for a film this far into a franchise to be as deep and as involved as this one is. You wouldn't think a sixth film would be as good as it is, and yet this manages to just basically throw everything but the kitchen sink, and it all sticks to the wall.
It really does. And I think there's a lot of reasons for that. For one thing, you brought back the director of what I think is the greatest of the Star Trek films, Nicholas Meyer, Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan. For him to step back behind the camera after Star Trek V, William Shatner's film, which I think gets unfairly maligned. Yeah, it's not a great film. Yeah. And, certainly the visual effects were not very good. And that was a big part of the problem. But it really has some really special moments, but still not a great movie. But you're right, Chris. I mean, to have a 6 next to the name and have it be this good, I'm trying to think of other franchises where, like, this far in, you're really having good films. I'm thinking of Mission Impossible, the Mission 4, 5, and 6. All those movies are great. That series actually keeps getting better, which is amazing. Fast and Furious 5, the 5th one, Fast 5, was actually really, really good. But, other franchises, other series that are this long into its series and have a stellar installment, few and far between.
Very few movies make it to 6. I mean, I'm thinking of like On Her Majesty's Secret Service, James Bond made it that far at that point. Godzilla films. I know it's crazy, but hey, who doesn't love a good Godzilla film? But yeah, I mean, making it to 6 and being good is a rarity, and we as Trek fans should be honored and blessed that we get to do that. But Scott, before we go into the actual film, even though we are critics and reviewers, and this is what we do, at the heart of it all, we're a Star Trek fan. Where did your love of Star Trek begin?
Well, that's easy I remember vividly, so I just turned 54. So yeah, I'm a bit old. If the gray hair wasn't an indication, I'm up there. But my entry into Star Trek happened in 1974. See, Star Trek went off the air after its original run in 1969. But like so many people, like so many Trekkers who discovered Star Trek in the early 70s, they discovered it when the show was in syndication, when it was airing 5 nights a week. And that is where Star Trek really found its audience, or rather the audience found Star Trek. And that is when Star Trek really turned into a phenomenon. So guys, I'm really, really, really proud to be part of what I like to call the syndication generation. The syndication generation is the generation that led to the movies, which led to Next Generation and DS9 and so on and so on. But the moment that really lit my fuse happened in the fall of 1974. I was 6 years old, and I was playing wiffle ball in the cul-de-sac with my neighbors, my friends, and it was, I remember it was the fall because it was chilly. We were wearing jackets, but it was still nice out where we could play wiffle ball outside. So at 7 o'clock at night, my friend Mitch Paul, he drops his bat. He goes, "Oh, it's 7 o'clock," and he runs inside, and we're like, "Where the heck is he going?" So I ran in his basement door. I didn't even knock. I just went inside. And there he is sitting in front of the TV on the floor like this, and I look at him, and then I looked at the TV, and the image that I saw, which is embedded in my consciousness, just like everything about the original series. But this moment, I see the landing party beam up to the Enterprise. The landing party.
Oh, I know where you're going.
Okay, ready? Ready for this, Brendan? Kirk, Scotty, McCoy, and Uhura. What's the episode?
It's Near and Near.
That is correct, Brandon. So I see them beaming up, and I see this like lightning and thunder, and I see this guy with pointed ears in the transporter room with another guy in a red shirt, Lieutenant Kyle, and they're trying to beam the landing party aboard, and they phase out, and then you see the Enterprise go from left to right. And then there's a flash of lightning, and the Enterprise is going from right to left. And the crew beams aboard. The landing party beams aboard wearing different uniforms. And now that guy with the pointed ears, he has a Van Dyke. They call it a goatee.
Yeah, the evil goatee, yeah.
Evil goatee. So my entry into Star Trek was Mirror, Mirror. And that immediately got me hooked. Now, gentlemen,
one of the best episodes of Star Trek ever.
Absolutely. Absolutely it is. I mean, it inspired so many follow-ups in Deep Space Nine, especially, and Enterprise. But the thing is that Mirror, Mirror is not, most of the episode takes place in the Mirror universe. So, that was my entry point. And it was weird because it was like not a typical episode of Star Trek, but the character of Kirk, especially that moment when he says, "In every revolution, there's one man with a vision." Like from that moment on, I was like, now there's a hero, there's a role model. From that moment going forward, Captain Kirk became my hero. I wanted to be Captain Kirk then. I want to be Captain Kirk now. But also because they were showing the episodes in production order, it was on Channel 17 in Philadelphia, where I grew up. So they were showing the episodes from the beginning of the second season. And I always felt like the beginning of the second season is when the original Star Trek really hit its stride. You had great episodes like Amok Time, the Doomsday Machine, right? And you had these great directors like Joseph Pevney and Mark Daniels, Ralph Sinetsky. You also had Gene Kuhn was producing the show. He was the day-to-day showrunner, as they call it now, back then. And that's really just everything was working. The actors knew their characters and so on. So, I'm watching like The Deadly Years and Metamorphosis and, The Doomsday Machine and Journey to Babel. So that was really how I discovered Star Trek and immediately embraced it. So, over those early years, I got the trading cards from Topps. I got the Mego action figures. I got the Star Trek poster books. I got, Brendan, I love those Star Trek photo novels.
Yes, indeed.
And then I started going to the conventions and, it just built from there. And I have to say that Star Trek, among other things, it changed my life. And by that, I mean, if it wasn't for Star Trek, I never would have moved to California, because I moved to California back in 91 to work for the company Creation Conventions. They run the Star Trek conventions. You know, I moved out to LA to work for them. I worked there for 10 years. I mean, you can't change your life any more than that.
Scott, it's funny you mention Mirror Mirror, because I am a huge fan of that episode.
I see it.
Yes. Those of you who are on the audio who can't see, I have a rather extensive Funko Pop collection.
Even more than me, and that's
I have a pretty large one. But my Star Trek collection is helmed by the entire set that was released earlier this year, which is basically all Mirror Mirror. So I'm very proud of my Spock with his goatee.
You know, it's a great moment of that episode, Mirror Mirror. You know, so you know, Spock is like, you know, basically threatening to kill Captain Kirk, and Kirk says to him, "Is that a threat?" And Spock says, "I don't make threats, Captain. I merely state facts. I found you to be an excellent officer. Our missions have been profitable." But then Kirk says, "You'd find me to be a formidable enemy." And Spock says, "I'm aware of that, Captain. I trust that you are aware of the reverse." So as Spock walks away, the look on Kirk's face is one of admiration. Like, he respects, even though he's in another universe, he's still Spock. He still admires him and respects him. The look on his face is like, "Yeah, that's my guy." You know?
Indeed.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, let's get right down into Star Trek 6. Otherwise, I think we'll just keep going on and reminiscing about our love of Star Trek.
Yeah.
Not that we would mind.
No, of course not. But Scott, we're going to start with you. In agreeing to be on our podcast and going, "Oh, Star Trek 6. What did you think getting to do a rewatch of Star Trek 6?
Well, I've rewatched this movie many times over the years. It's, I think, next to Wrath of Khan, it's probably the Star Trek movie that I've rewatched the most, because, you know, I've come to love Star Trek the Motion Picture more and more over the years. I think of all the films,
In fact, it was you who changed my mind about that film.
yeah, if of all the Star Trek movies, the motion picture is the one that has aged the best. It is also the Star Trek movie that feels the most like an actual Star Trek episode, because, you know, there's no, like, you know, there's nothing about like space battles. It's not about a villain like Khan or anything like that, but it's just like that. This thing is coming towards Earth. They got to destroy it before it destroys the Earth. And they realize it's a living being looking for its creator. That is such a typical Star Trek flip. But Star Trek 6, again, you know, I had such anticipation for it that when it opened on December 7th, 1991, I was duly rewarded with movie that I was like, okay, now that's the movie you go out on. And that too it feels a lot like a Star Trek, because Star Trek was at its best when it mirrored the times.
Yes.
What was happening around that time? You had the fall of the wall, the fall of the Soviet Union, you know, the fall of the Klingon Empire.
Chernobyl.
You know, that is Star Trek. And you know, there well, I mean, we really get into this, but there are so many things about that movie that, like you pointed out, Chris, that make it go deeper. You know, it was a little hard for me, and I mentioned this when we were talking about it on the Cinephiles, because I covered it with Steve and John Roca.
Great episode, by the way.
Yeah, we had to put that into 2 parts, is how deep we got into it. But, you know, when you watch the original series, okay, and you watch an episode like The Savage Curtain, which we just covered on Enterprise Incidents, you know, and Kirk is telling Lincoln, you know, we've learned to be proud of who we are, after Uhura says we don't feel words anymore. And then you go back to Balance of Terror, when Styles, you know, on the bridge is making, yeah, he's making a dig at Spock, and Kirk swings his chair around, you know, it gets in Styles' face, and he says, "Well, here's one thing you can be sure of, mister. Leave any bigotry in your quarters. There's no room for it here on the bridge." That's the Kirk that I was like, oh my God, this guy is awesome. He is a hero. You know, he always said and did the right thing. And in Star Trek 6, at least in the beginning of the film, he does not say the right thing. What does he say to Spock when Spock says we have an opportunity here to bridge, you know, to extend a hand to the Klingons?
Yep.
What does Kirk say?
Let them die.
Now he doesn't just say let them die.
He spits it out. He
is like he is
it's venomous.
Venomous, exact. That's a great word for it, Brennan. And that was really, it is still during the rewatches that I do, hard for me to see Kirk just let them die. That's not the Kirk who extended compassion to the Gorn in Arena. That's not the Kirk who extended a hand to Charlie Evans when the Thasians were about to whisk him back into Thasian space in Charlie X. But, you know, Kirk has been, by that point in his career, Kirk has very much been steeped in the Klingons are the baddies, and Klingon killed his son, which that reason alone, it's understandable why he would venomously say, let them die, because maybe he wants revenge.
It's very much a part of Kirk's arc, and we'll get into that because we have from the beginning of talking about each of these films each month that Kirk has a full arc through all of these of growth. And I want to bring that up when we get into it, because I think the choice of literary quotes that they use is very indicative of the themes that we're dealing with here when you compare the literature. And I did this with Wrath of Khan, because Khan uses it so heavily.
Oh my word.
And you go into it, and now it's Chang and him, and we'll go into that. But let's go ahead and break down what happens in the film. And then we can talk about some of these things and the things that we liked and go through these things. So Star Trek 6 opens up with the explosion of the Klingon moon of Praxis, which is their primary energy making facility. We are introduced to the USS Excelsior now, not the NX Excelsior.
Oh, so beautiful.
Helmed by, thank God, Captain Hikaru Sulu, who is possibly my second favorite original series character of all time.
Oh my.
Yeah, he is, but he's awesome. But they encounter this wave of energy, and they call, do you need any help, Klingons? And the Klingons, well, there was an incident, but we don't need your help. Stay away. We got this handled. A few months later, they're showing the time isn't great, but they do it. A few months later, the Enterprise crew is called to a special meeting where they are explained what happened, and they are ordered to rendezvous with the Klingon High Chancellor to open up diplomatic relations. And they are informed of this by none other than Captain Spock, who had no conversations with Kirk about this. Kirk's none too happy about it. And as we said, had the idea of, hey, let them die. They deserve to die for what they did. But Spock says, you're under orders. Admirals say you're under orders. Although I will say there's an interesting transition right there with some of the Admiralty that we'll get into that I never noticed until a rewatch. But you could tell the Admirals are not.
They're up to something.
They're up to something. But the Enterprise goes out, meets Chancellor Gorkin and his staff, including General Chang, played brilliantly by Christopher Plummer, who has the least Klingon voice I've ever heard in history, and yet one of the most intimidating. He's so awesome.
That's amazing. He is amazing.
They have a state dinner where it's very tense. There is
it's like a family Thanksgiving dinner.
Yeah, it is. It's very tense between
it's an awkward political conversation.
And they start quoting Shakespeare opposite of each other. And they kind of go at each other, and you feel the tension that's building and building and building. After the state dinner, everybody goes back to their respective ships, their respective rooms. But then a red alert happens, and it looks like the Enterprise has fired upon the Kronos 1, which has severely crippled the ship. And we see two unidentified Starfleet crew members in EV suits and gravity boots beam over to the ship, where they single-handedly decimate the Klingon crew and attempt to assassinate Chancellor Gorkon. Kirk and the crew attest, we didn't do anything. But of course, it looks like the Enterprise did. Spock advises Kirk, saying, we need to figure out what's going on. And Kirk and Bones are like, we need to go over there. We need to fix this now. Because they know, even though he disagrees politically, they need to do this. Otherwise, a potential huge problem is happening. And so Spock says, all right, Captain, slaps him on the back. By the way, how Spock knew to do what he did, little weird in that, but that's Spock for you.
Yeah.
They beam over. They go over and check the Chancellor. Bones attempts to fix him, but surprisingly, Bones doesn't understand Klingon anatomy and can't save him. And the Chancellor dies right there. And Gorkon basically says, don't let this be the end. Don't let this happen. But Chang arrests Kirk and Bones for the murder of Chancellor Gorkon. And Spock basically is told by the crew, let's go save them. We got to save them. No. We should let diplomacy play out. We need to let diplomacy play out right now. And the two are taken to Kronos for a trial, which is a very show trial, where they are defended by Colonel Worf, the grandfather of future Star Trek regular Worf, son of Moog, which I love that little cameo by Michael Dorn. Way to go. But they are found guilty of the guilty. They are found guilty. But in the name of security and in the name of everybody working together, we're not going to commit you to death. We're going to send you to the Gulag. Or at least that's what it's supposed to be. Rurapente, which is a dilithium mine. And so they're sent there to live out their sentence and live life on Rurapente. Meanwhile, the Enterprise crew is trying to figure out what happened. And they deduce that, no, we did not fire upon them, but we did fire upon them. Someone altered the logs to make it look like they did. And they deduced that due to the lack of gravity on the ship, that somebody with gravity boots is our killer. They're our killers. And so they begin this ship-wide search for these gravity boots, looking for it, trying to figure out what's going on. And they begin that. Meanwhile, Kirk and Bones are trying to figure out a way to get out. And they meet this shapeshifter. I think this is our first Star Trek shapeshifter. Is this our first shapeshifter?
At least in the films, I think.
Definitely.
Well, no. Technically, guys, the first shapeshifter on Star Trek was in the first episode that ever aired.
That's right.
The Salt Empire.
The
special effects.
That's right.
The special effects were very different. It was you didn't have the CGI, but the Salt Vampire was a shapeshifter, right?
That's true. That's very true. You're right.
True.
You're very right on that.
Thank you.
The man trap.
Yes.
The man
But
trap.
the shapeshifter says, "Hey, Kirk, listen, I can help you get out of here if you help me get out of here." Okay, cool. And so they follow along with it, and they manage to make
nothing suspicious at all.
Not at all. But they managed to get beyond the gravity or the energy shield that is protecting the place. I think it's a magnetic shield, but anyway, they get beyond it. And they're waiting for the Enterprise to come save them. And Kirk seems to know that the Enterprise is going to go find them. We found out that Spock, very smartly, before Kirk left the ship, left an iridium tracker on his shoulder, which actually you can see through the whole thing. They never find it. They never remove it, but you can clearly see it in the film.
Well, you know what? Maybe they just, because it's the same color as certain parts of his uniform, maybe it was just part of his uniform.
Yes, but they managed
to track because what happens is when Spock slaps him on the back with it, you have to watch the episode again to see that one moment there's nothing on Kirk's back, and then after Spock, hits it, he goes, "Perhaps you're right," and he puts the marker on his back. Then it's like right there, as clear as day.
But we do discover that the plot to get Kirk and Spock out was a trick in order to kill them, so that way no one knew what was going on. It turns out that there is a conspiracy to disrupt the talks between the Klingons and the Federation. And they are almost killed right there, but luckily Spock arrives just in time to beam them out, just as the Klingon leader was about to tell them everything. And Kirk, could you just waited like another minute?
Yeah,
I love that. But they discover that there was a conspiracy and that only one person could have done it. And so they lay a trap on the Enterprise, as the two crewmen who were the ones, they figured it out, were found dead. The two crewmen who were on it were found dead. And so they lay a trap in sickbay, saying that they're still alive. And the attempted killer comes to finish the job. And it is Kim Cattrall as Valeris, who we have thought has been an ally the whole time. But she is a part of this conspiracy.
Bad thing.
Yeah. And so Spock mind melds with her to find answers. And he finds out that Chang, along with the Romulan ambassador, basically it's an Admiral Cartwright, it's all part of this large 3 empire conspiracy, basically, to destabilize this, because it can never be peace. Peace could never be. Sulu gets a hold of them and says, okay, I know where the peace treaties are going to happen. It's at Kittimer. Get there now. And so the Enterprise goes there, and as they reach Kittimer, they come out of warp, but we find out the secret, and that General Chang, being the one behind it, has an experimental Romulan bird of prey that can fire.
Klingon bird of prey.
Or I said Romulan. Yeah, Klingon bird of prey. Thank you. And begins an attack on the Enterprise to stop them from beaming down. And so they have to fight and beat them, but they're getting beat up pretty heavily. Sulu arrives just in time, and so now we have the Excelsior and the Enterprise fighting against this bird of prey.
Target that bird and fire.
Spock and Bones do a little surgery using some gaseous detecting equipment on a torpedo and fire it. And it follows the trail of plasma and destroys the Klingon bird of prey with a little help.
To be.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, they beam down and manage to stop the attempted assassination of the Federation president. Mr. President, your legacy is secured. And they manage to save everything. The Enterprise is ordered to return for decommissioning. And Kirk, in his last bout of defiance, says, you know what? Screw it. Let's go out there. And he leaves with my favorite quote of to end any Star Trek: second star to the right, straight on to morning. And they go off. And I don't normally talk about the credits, but in the credits, we see the signatures of everybody. And I just love that epicness of like this goodbye that is going on. And
that's it, right? And, and I like that, as you're seeing all the signatures go by, and, you get to DeForest Kelley and then Leonard Nimoy, and then there's like a pause. And then it says William Shatner.
Yes.
Yeah,
I love it. So, Scott, I will give you the honor. What is something about this film that you really liked?
Well, one thing that Steve and I talked about a lot on Enterprise Incidents. One of the things that we admire the most about Kirk is when he admits that he is wrong.
Yes.
And he did that a lot more than you would think the captain of the Starship Enterprise would do that. I mean, he definitely admitted he was wrong in Errand of Mercy. That's a classic moment where he admits that he's wrong. In Metamorphosis, he's trying to destroy the companion to get off the planet with Commissioner Hedford so they can take her back to the Enterprise and cure her. And then that doesn't work, and they almost died. And then McCoy says to him, "You're a soldier so much, you forget that you're also a diplomat. Why don't you try waving a carrot instead of a stick?" And then he's like, there's a look, the camera zooms in on Shatner, and he like smiles, and he changes his tactic to one of empathy. And But that's the great thing about Kirk is when he admits that he's wrong. And that is what happens in Star Trek 6. You know, what happens when they beam down to the ceremony? He says,
Yeah.
people can be very frightened of change. And the epiphany when Kirk realizes that he was wrong is when they're on the bridge prior to that and they're interrogating Valeris. And she said, you said it, let them die. And Kirk, like he looks down, like, what have I done? You know, and he like slowly sits in the captain's chair, like realizing, oh my, I was wrong. And I just think that that's one of the great things about a leader is when that leader can admit that they were wrong. I mean, there's a lot of things I love about Star Trek 6. I mean, I love General Chang.
Oh, my word.
My gosh, Christopher Plummer, who he and Shatner go way, way, way back.
Yes, they did. Yes, they do.
Yeah, they go way back. But I always felt like one of the best Klingon performances, one of the best actors to play a Klingon was, you know, other than Worf, but he was a regular on the series. I'm talking about guest stars. I think the best Klingon for me was Kang from Day of the Dove.
Yes.
Because so much about
the great Michael Ansara.
Michael Ansara is magnificent. So much of his performance is carried over into the way the Klingons are depicted in the Next Generation.
Very much.
Right? Very much. But up until Star Trek 6, I felt like, you know, Michael Ansara's Kang was my favorite. And then I'm watching Star Trek 6.
Yeah.
And the legendary Christopher Plummer, he just, he's, you know, like when they have their dinner on the Enterprise, and they're in the transporter room and they're leaving, and Kirk says, oh, we got to do this again sometime. And you know, Chang says to Kirk, he goes, parting is such sweet sorrow. Have we not heard the chimes?
Have we not heard the chimes at midnight?
Oh, you know, and just I mean, to have a Shakespearean actor like Plummer and Kirk, you know, Shatner is also a Shakespearean actor.
Very much, yes.
But the way, and you know, of course, he's going to lay it on thick, you know, during
very
the
much,
battle.
yes.
But just the way he just says, parting is such sweet sorrow. And then, you know, the Chancellor is like, you don't trust me, do you, Kirk? And Kirk, you know, Kirk just doesn't say anything. He goes, I don't blame you. If there is going to be a Brave New World, our generation is going to have the hardest time living in it. I mean, there's so much to this movie. It's so great. And
speaking of the fact that you just did at the episode in which featured Abraham Lincoln, which I'm drawing a blank on the name of the episode.
Lee Bergier.
The
Savage Curtain.
So it's curtain, and you see Gorkin with a Abraham Lincoln beard.
Good point.
Interesting little detail. Played, of course, by the incomparable, the late great David Warner, who might have been the best guest star of Star Trek: The Next Generation.
Oh, absolutely. Oh,
playing the evil Gul Madred.
Oh my God,
he is Chain of Command.
Excellent. RR4 Lights. Oh my God, that episode, 2-part episode. With Ronnie.
You will be addressed as human.
Oh, that's you know, after you get past the first 2 seasons of Next Gen, that show.
Oh yes,
season 3, Next Gen got great, and it stayed great right up until All Good Things.
Yes.
The thing is, the Klingons that we get in this are so well developed. His daughter is fabulous. I believe her. I buy her absolutely 100%. Chang by far, to me, I know this is crazy and dogmatic, but I find him more threatening than Khan.
Oh, I believe that.
Sure. I buy it 100% because Khan, the thing is, Khan is all about revenge. Khan is single-minded, while Chang is more than that. Chang is trying to protect the longevity of his people. He believes wholeheartedly that joining with the Federation, even in an alliance, will destroy everything it means to be Klingon. He is the consummate Klingon warrior.
He is the Eric Killmonger of Klingon.
Absolutely. I buy that 100%.
I
He
buy it.
isn't wrong. He
Brandon.
He's
isn't
so
wrong.
eloquent, and that's the Christopher
He
Plummer.
isn't wrong, but the way he does it is wrong.
You know,
I love the with the trial when Kirk and McCoy are standing trial for the murder of the Chancellor, and
Don't
you
wait for the translation. Answer me now.
oh my God, he's so great.
Yes.
He goes, "Don't wait for the translation. Answer me now!" Like, oh my God, that is
Which,
next level
to
stuff.
those who may be too young who are listening, is an incident that really happened.
Yep, that's right. And when did that happen? Wasn't the Nuremberg, right?
After, no, that was after the Bay of Pigs invasion.
Oh, that's right.
Mhm.
That's right. Yeah.
In the UN, the Soviet ambassador was being questioned, and the guy questioning him said, "Don't wait for the translation. Answer me now."
Unbelievable. Amazing moment. It's such an
I
amazing moment.
love him. He's such a good villain in this. And you mentioned David Warner, not a villain for a change.
Yep.
I love David Warner in this though, because and his time in
Yes.
it is very short, but you believe again that Gorkin wants peace. He
And the
knows his
name
people don't have a
Gorkin
choice.
is a
What?
combination of Gorbachev and Lincoln.
Ooh,
Interesting little detail.
Very
that is a
interesting.
nice detail.
That is a nice detail. Yeah.
I absolutely love his performance in this, and the rest of the crew are admirable as well. I absolutely love everybody, and again, my favorite guy, Sulu. Sulu kicks ass more than we've ever seen him up to this point do. Like, this is the
George
first time
Takei.
we've seen him
Do you have a
really.
hearing problem, mister?
Yeah, George Takei is so good. I mean, on one hand, you don't see. I mean, Sulu doesn't have any scenes at all with the rest of the crew. The stuff on the view screen. That wasn't filmed at the same. It wasn't a real view screen, folks. So, but
Oh no, my illusion is ruined.
yeah, sorry to burst your bubble, Brandon, but to finally see Sulu in command of another starship, which he took command of the Enterprise of at least 4 times off the top of my head.
Yes, yes, he did.
Right, he did it in Arena, he did it in the Savage Curtain. He was there. The Spock's brain. He was in the captain's chair, and there's one more that I'm missing, where Sulu was captain, or sat in for captain.
It fits so much. It absolutely does. And I of any of the other crew that I would figure would be a captain, it's going to be Sulu.
Oh, and the return of Yeoman Rand.
Yes, she is not a yeoman anymore by this point. She's a lieutenant.
Yes, she is.
Lieutenant. Yep.
Janice Rand.
It was great to see Grace Lee Whitney, definitely have a, they kept bringing her back because, obviously, that she was, let go from the original series.
Yes.
For
unfortunately.
There are a few reasons that go around as to actually why, but without getting into them, I really, I remember when Steve and I first started doing Enterprise incidents, like we got a whole new appreciation for Rand.
Yes. Oh, yes.
And Kirk.
I believe she was in. I want to say, was it 3, 4, and 6?
She was in 1.
1, 3, 4, and 6.
Yeah,
1, 3,
she
4,
was the
6.
transporter chief when they
Zahn gets, or not Zahn,
2 people gets
killed in the
that's right.
Okay. So she was in 1, she was in 3. You see her for a brief moment. The Enterprise is pulling into space dock,
shaking her head like, "What has Kirk been up to this time?"
Yeah, like she's looking at the Enterprise with all the battle scars on, and she shakes her head like, "Oh, what did he do? What happened?" And she was in 4 briefly when
Starfleet Command.
Yeah, she was the Starfleet Command scenes when all hell is breaking loose with the probe, and then in Star Trek 6, she's on the Excelsior.
I love it.
And in Star Trek Voyager.
Oh,
that I will connect that later, because let me tell you that makes me love Star Trek 6 so much. Watching those 2 together, and the fact that I still watch Star Trek going, where is Tuvok? Why do I not see my Tuvok?
Yeah,
the guy who looks like Tuvok on the Enterprise B.
Oh, that's true.
Yeah, that's
right.
true.
It's twin brother who doesn't have pointed ears. I don't know.
Yes. Tubix. Oh, that's another thing. Anyway,
real good there.
But yeah, something else that I really love about this is is the themes, the literary themes that we dig into with Kirk, but specifically from the beginning, we've dealt with Kirk aging and Kirk realizing, am I still useful? Do I have a purpose? And he does something interesting, and it's my favorite quote in the entire film. And I already said it earlier. Where do we go, Captain? Second star to the right, straight on till morning. I think
Eternal youth.
the idea of eternal youth. What is Peter Pan all about? But the idea of living in youth forever. And what is Kirk all about but wanting to continue that? And Kirk kind of continues that speech in Star Trek Generations.
And I find it very interesting that the same year this movie came out, what other movie came out? Hook.
Hook.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah. Look at you, Brennan. Way to go.
Yeah.
You
I
make
don't know the exact date, but I'm sure you do.
But I really enjoy this look of Kirk embracing youth and embracing not letting go. And he doesn't, even though they're supposed to stand down. He's all like, you know what? I'm not ready to grow up. I'm not ready.
Right.
And he never has been. He never has been. Even as an admiral, you felt that pull. Every time he took the Enterprise chair, whether it was in motion picture, he takes it during Wrath of Khan. Like, this is the kind of person that he is. He's not ready to stand down.
And is it interesting that in the next film, where does he end up? In the Nexus.
In the Nexus. Yeah.
Where he never ages.
Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely. And I love
These
this
little
about
tie-ins are really cool.
Kirk in these films. This is his arc.
Mm-hmm.
It's all about accepting who I am and yet not accepting who I am. What side do we fit on? You know, after Spock dies, what does he say in Wrath of Khan?
After he says, I feel young.
I feel young. When he's on the bridge. Yeah, when he's on the bridge. It's this continuing arc that he goes through. And it doesn't end. And yet Star Trek 6 is all about the end of an era. Am I part of an aged system? Am I part of preconceived notions?
Have I outlived my usefulness?
Exactly. How many people have lived through the Cold War in real life and were nothing but soldiers and spies and politicians? And this is all we've known is the hatred of the Soviets, the hatred of the red power. Kirk is no different of that. And yet that last line is this idea of hope. And yet in humanity, is he really ready to grow up? Is he really ready to move on? And in Generations, we see that with him in the Nexus. I could change everything. I could do whatever I want. I could be with Antonio. He never really learned how to grow up.
You know, I did not love Generations. And I felt that the death of Kirk, it just was not, dare I say the word, it was not executed well. It was not the payoff that he deserved, that we deserved after following him for what was then almost 30 years. But the prologue scene, all the scenes on the Enterprise B, I thought were fantastic. I would have been perfectly happy just to have that be the movie.
Risk is part of the game if you want to sit in that chair.
When Harriman vacates the chair and offers it to Kirk.
He sits for a second. He sat for a second.
And I'm telling you, Chris, the look on Kirk's face when he sat in that chair, he was like, I'm back, you know? But then he went, Shatner is brilliant. Shatner's performance is right on point. He gets up and says, wait, no, your place is here. I'll go down. I'll take care of, you know. And so he goes down to the lower decks and, you know, he fixes the problem and he's like, that's it, let's go. And, you know, the sacrifice, so many times that Kirk was ready to sacrifice himself for the Enterprise. And, you know, of course he saved the day, and he saved the day here, but barely. You know, the day was saved, but he wasn't, at least until Picard ended up seeing him in the Nexus.
And I know we need that for a story, and believe me, we will talk about this with Star Trek Generations.
Next
but
month. Oh, yeah.
I really feel that Harriman was always an inept captain, and the right thing to do would have been said, no, Kirk, we need the most experienced officer right now. Stay here, please.
Yeah.
Show this bridge. This bridge needs you. I'm younger. I'm faster. I know this ship. Let me go. That is what should have happened. And then Kirk never would have got caught in the Nexus, I don't think. Harriman could have done the exact same thing that Kirk did.
Yeah, I mean,
next
look,
month's discussion is going to be fun.
Oh, yeah.
I get, you know, for the sake of a plot point, you know, that Harriman is out of his league, you know, the moment the Enterprise B leaves dry dock. But like, how the hell did this guy get to be the captain of? I've been asking myself that question ever since
Here's the thing:
1994.
in universe, he's about as young as Kirk was.
It's because he's
Kirk
Cameron.
Yeah,
It's because he's really Cameron from.
But Kirk was that age, and he was in command of the Enterprise. He was born to be in that chair.
Yeah.
Indeed.
Yes.
Indeed.
Brennan, what were some of the things you liked about this film?
Well, let's talk about the title. Now, Star Trek has always had a literary history.
Mhm.
Whether it be Space Eater Wrath to Khan, whether it be The Conscience of the King,
Sure, excellent one.
whether it be A Quality of Mercy from Strange New Worlds. Star Trek has a literary history, and so in reference to the title, allow me to quote from Hamlet, which is where the line "the undiscovered country" comes from.
Mhm.
Who would mortals dare to grunt and sweat under a weary life, but that the dread of something after death, the undiscovered country from whose bourne no traveler returns, puzzles the will.
Gave me the chills, Brandon.
Oh my word.
Shakespeare is not unfamiliar to Star Trek. We get
And I
Shakespeare
believe-
a lot in Star
And
Trek.
I believe as a 9-year-old kid seeing this movie, this was my introduction to William Shakespeare.
Mhm.
But so the idea of the title is Chancellor Gorka modifies it to mean the future.
Right, that's right.
In Hamlet, Hamlet is talking about the idea of death.
That's correct.
The idea of, do I keep living in an uncertain world? Also, to quote Shakespeare, a naughty world. Hint a little Willy Wonka in there. Or, death, which we don't know what is beyond it. But the point is that none of us know the future. This movie is all about the uncertainty of the future, but the hope of a better future, which is what Star Trek, it's always been about. Now, also, a major theme in this movie is in the scene when Valeris, played excellently by Kim Cattrall, I might add, is in Spock's quarters. What is she looking at on the wall? She's looking at a painting of Adam and Eve
Being thrown out.
being driven out of the Garden of Eden. Now, why is this significant? Well, it is the end of an era. But not only was it a somewhat of a sad ending for Adam and Eve, it was a rebirth. It was a beginning. This movie is all about death and re-beginning. Death and beginnings is really what this movie is about. And I think it is significant that it deals in the themes of death, themes of the future, and the idea of, now I mentioned this earlier on the show. I have been loving the Star Wars series Andor, which is the most overtly political of Star Wars shows. Now, Star Trek has always been political. This might be the most political of the movies.
For sure.
Reflecting real world events. Chernobyl, the Berlin Wall, or the Chad, many other things. And I think that what's brilliant about that is it's the idea of change is really hard for people. Now, Scott, having grown up during the Cold War, what was it like for you when the Berlin Wall came down?
Oh, what a great question. I remember vividly. I was a senior in college at Penn State University when the wall came down. And to wrap your head around the fall of the Soviet Union, the fall of communism lost. I mean, not including Cuba, they were still very much into that stuff.
Yeah, and North Korea, but we won't go there.
It was like, wow. Like, I remember we were all filled with hope for the future that if communism was a failure and we didn't have to prove it by going to World War III to prove our point with freedom and democracy, then we just took one step closer to Gene Roddenberry's vision of the future by the Berlin Wall falling. I remember vividly being so like inspired, like, wow, this is a great moment for the human race that the wall came down. That was just amazing.
The idea that in this movie, Eilborn from Errand of Mercy, his prophecy was fulfilled. That the Klingons and the Federation would become friends. Which is something that Kor thought was inconceivable.
I think it really ties
to quote another movie.
It all really ties together too with Kirk's final log. Where he says, this is the final crew of the Starship Enterprise under my command. This ship and her history will shortly become the care of another crew. To them and their posterity, we will commit our future. They will continue the voyages we have begun and journey to all the undiscovered countries, boldly going where no one has gone before. Where Kirk finally makes the change that Picard already had in Next Generation.
Yeah, that's what Picard grew up in. I mean, that was the world he was brought into. Kirk's world was different. Kirk had to make the change, and he had to adapt.
But I really love this acceptance of this change, and that captain's log really kind of summarizes what this is all about. It's about coming together, but it's also about passing the torch on. It's about being ready. We're going to give this off to another crew. Although I never understood that. They were called in for decommissioning. Why are we giving the ship to somebody for decommissioning it?
Maybe they're talking really about the name Enterprise.
That's probably true. Yeah. But it's just a little thing that I was like, what? Wait, what? Whatever. It doesn't take away from them.
Another thing that I absolutely love about this film is the tension. The feeling at the beginning, as soon as Cliff Idleman's incredible score starts playing.
Planets.
It's like, oh boy.
It's dark.
And then, of course, you get the Chernobyl comparison with Praxis. And of course, they're like, we don't need any help.
Yeah.
Which is, as you might recall, what happened in the Soviet Union. Didn't tell anybody that, oh, by the way, we might have just caused the death of all of humanity. Thankfully, it was contained, but the idea that these old habits die hard, and that we see, as we see now in our real world, there are certain individuals who will not let go. May I point out another excellent performance in this movie?
Sure.
Incredible Brock Peters as Admiral Cartwright.
I was going to bring him up because there's actually a fun connection with him and Colonel West, who was not in the original theatrical release.
Yes, Renee Auberjonois.
Renee Auberjonois. So it's very interesting that both Brock Peters and Renee Auberjonois come back in DS9 as I definitely Odo, a major character, but also
write the good book, brother Vinny. Write the good book.
Brock Peters as Ben Sisko's father.
Yeah.
So I love that comes back around. Those two come back in. You know, it's really interesting too in the history of Star Trek how somebody could come in and do something so small, and yet the casting producers go, you know what? And they bring him in. I mean, look at David Warner, as you said, as Gul Madred. Like, whoa, mind blowing. And actually, I think this is around the same time. I think they were doing it right around the same time.
Yes, I believe so.
So. But this is not the first or last time that somebody has done one thing and come back to do another later and to just hit it even stronger.
Yes.
Absolutely.
And
Yeah.
also, Scott mentioned the cinephiles earlier.
Mhm.
If you guys want to see the kind of actor Brock Peters is, go and check out the 1962 masterpiece,
Kill a Mockingbird.
Kill a
To Kill a
Mockingbird.
Mockingbird.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, I love Brock Peters
His
so much.
performance as Tom Robinson is nothing short of extraordinary.
Mhm.
Absolutely. So that whole movie is extraordinary.
Yeah. The last
And
thing
may
about
I add,
oh, go ahead.
Gregory Peck is in that movie.
Oh yeah, sure.
And
There's-
who plays Spock in Discovery
his,
and
his
Strange World, but none other than Gregory Peck's grandson. Interesting connection there.
you know,
Very
let me tell you, there's a guy who would have been great in Star Trek, Gregory Peck, would have been amazing. And actually, let me
Mm.
tell you, if Christopher Plummer didn't do Chang, I could see Gregory Peck playing Chang.
And Gregory Peck also
fun.
played Captain Ahab.
He did.
Yes.
If oh, let me tell you, the Moby Dick comparisons we have throughout Star Trek is insane. We go back to Moby Dick a lot.
Oh yeah, we go. I mean, you know, we
For
first. went
hate's
Moby
sake,
Dick
I
in the
spent my
game.
last breath at the.
Right. And then of course First Contact and
And we
the
get
over
we get
references
Shakespeare,
there.
we
Yeah.
get
I must be
Melville,
drawn here.
we
The
get
light must be turned.
Melville,
Yeah.
Melville, Shakespeare, Milton. It's insane.
Needless to say, I think
The
we
amount we
love
get.
this. We love this film. I mean, it's a great political intrigue film.
A
This
comment on our own time.
This is a very Tom Clancy Star Trek film.
And it's
Sure.
also very timely. What are we
Mhm.
dealing with right now in our country?
Yeah.
Yes,
Sure, well.
absolutely.
People who are not willing to let go of old grudges.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. But we do have to move on in this, unfortunately. Otherwise, we'll sit on what we love because this is, to me, this is my favorite. I could
Welcome
watch
to
this
the
over and over.
24-hour Undiscovered Country podcast.
But we have to say it isn't a perfect film. It isn't
Mhm.
perfect. So, Scott, I want to start with you. What are some of the things with this film that you don't like or might have a problem with?
Well, it's not that I have a problem with it now, but when it first came out, it was very, very dark. I mean, look, Star Trek has gotten extremely dark over the years. When Deep
Yes.
Space Nine came out, everyone said, "Oh my God, it's too dark." And then when Star Trek Discovery came out, you know, everyone said, "Oh my God, this is too dark." And actually, I think that Discovery is
Well,
too.
season one, but yeah.
Yeah, season one was you know, with the stuff with Lorca, I did not like that at all. But it's gotten better.
Mm.
That's a whole other conversation. But for Star Trek 6, I remember at the time, it was, I mean, ultimately it is a positive aspirational story that makes that is right up in line with what Star Trek is all about. But it has to get there. It has to be earned. And Star Trek 6 earned it because of what it overcame to get there. But my first viewing of it, I remember thinking, wow, this is dark. I don't like seeing Kirk say, let the Klingons die. I mean, like, you know, you go back to the very first episode that was filmed for the original series, not the pilots, the Corbomite maneuver. You know, they're breaking away from
Starring Clint
Balak.
Howard.
Yeah, they're breaking away from Balak's ship. You know, and after they're being told that the Enterprise is going to be destroyed and so on, and they break away. They break away from the Phasarius, and then they go. What does Kirk do? He says, "Let's go back and see if he needs help." That's the empathy. That's the compassion. That's the compassion that I always loved about Kirk. And that compassion,
It's the quality of mercy. There it is.
it's not there in Star Trek 6.
Mhm.
And I mean, it's not. I mean, that's part of the arc. That's what makes Star Trek 6 a very good film, not just a good Star Trek movie, but just a good movie, period,
Mhm.
is that Kirk does go through an arc. He has to overcome his own bigotry, which was something that was thrust upon him when the Klingons killed the son. You Klingon bastards. But you know, I just, you know, sometimes the comedy, the comedy didn't work. Like when they're on Rorpente, the stuff
Yeah.
with Iman, you know, like I just, when she shapeshifts into Kirk and Kirk is fighting Kirk, that didn't really work for me. I thought that was like just kind of. I mean, granted, this is 1991 visual effects, and it,
Which, might I add, next week we'll see the launch of the Willow series.
Oh, that's right.
In 1988, Willow made one of the first morphing effects,
But what made
which is the same effect they use here.
the more first ever CGI effect was, Star Trek 2.
Yep. Yes, it was. Yes,
The
it was
Genesis
Genesis.
But I mean, it's not that there's something I don't like about Star Trek 6. I just don't think that, like, when I think of just how emotionally moving Star Trek 2 is, and how fun Star Trek 4 is, and how heartfelt Star Trek 4 is, Star Trek 6 is kind of a cold movie. It's a cold film. But it's about the Cold War, or the end of it.
In space, all warriors are cold warriors.
I agree.
It's heavy, man. I'm telling you, it's heavy. And I love that about Star Trek 6, but it's not my favorite Star Trek movie because of it.
Yeah, that's well said. Well said.
One of the things that really bothered me for it, and I sit on this all the time, is the treatment of Uhura, and this time Chekhov. Uhura once again is treated almost as a joke with the whole translator and the Klingon thing.
That stuff.
I can't stand that. And Nichelle Nichols is an amazing actress. One of the few things I love about Star Trek the animated series was actually Nichelle Nichols' performance in it. I love Nichelle Nichols, and we know that she actually is a competent actor, and they don't give her anything but jokes. In fact, I think there's a story where the line that Chekhov says, "Guess who's coming to dinner?" They wanted to give that to Uhura, and Uhura said, "Heck no, I'm not saying that line."
There was a bit of trouble making this film in that regard.
So they resort her to a joke with the Klingon language. She's one of the most competent linguists in Starfleet history.
Yes, just watch Strange New Worlds, people.
Yes, Strange New Worlds. We see it in the JJ verse. I know it's a different universe, but I'd like to think both Uhuras are equally competent.
I love the JJ movies.
Yes.
Maybe we'll have you back for a JJ film.
I love those movies. Yeah,
I'd love to have you back for Star Trek 09. I think
count me in.
Yes. Well, we'll get there. We got a couple months.
We've got quite a team for Star Trek 09, I think.
But that being said, I just don't like that. And then Chekhov is kind of resorted to comic relief through the whole thing, and that's not fair to Chekhov or Walter Koenig.
I agree with you. I agree 100%.
Only the size of my head.
Or the whole, why can't we just, I'm like that whole phaser thing. He was a first officer aboard the Reliant. You're telling me he doesn't know this? He knows this. Why are we doing this to him?
Yeah.
I just
agree with you. I agree. Yeah, the comedy stuff didn't work for me in this.
It is head and shoulders above the comedy in Star Trek 5.
We also don't give enough for Rosanna DeSoto. Rosanna DeSoto plays Chancellor Gorkon's daughter, Azetber. I love her, and let me tell you why I love her. I actually the other night was up late just watching movies randomly, and I watched Stand and Deliver. I had already watched Star Trek 6, and I sat there going, why do I know this voice? Why do I know this voice? And I went to a deep dive and went, holy cow, Jaime Escalante's wife is Chancellor Gorkon's daughter.
I did not know that.
She won an independent Spirit Award for her performance in Stand to Deliver. This woman can
That's a great film.
And we don't give her near enough as a woman who is, by the way, head of now an empire. A woman, this is the Margaret Thatcher, basically. Thatcher was a major part of world political scheme. You're telling me we put in the enemy position a woman in charge, and we don't do enough with her, and she's a powerful actress. That's a crime that we did not get enough for her to do. And it's really sad, and unfortunately is indicative of a problem that early Star Trek had, and that's giving women enough of a stronger role in Star Trek history. I know we've had number one, and Brent and I have talked about this. You know, we had number one. We have the inclusion of Nichelle Nichols.
Thank
While
heavens for Rebecca Romaine as number
yes,
one.
while those things are great, they also at the exact same time denigrate those characters. And while we're giving women a position, we don't give them anything to do.
All right,
You
all right,
just put a, oh, go ahead.
All right, first of all, I completely agree with you. That the female characters in the original series and the movies, like if you're just going to add it up, it doesn't add up to enough. I agree with you. And if they were making that stuff today, if they were doing the original series today, if they were making those movies today, it would absolutely be different. There would be much more of a balance. I acknowledge that certain characters, the female characters are shortchanged in the original show, but I'm not going to judge 1966 through the eyes of 2022.
Fair enough.
It's not fair.
It's fair enough.
The fact that you had Uhura on the bridge at all in 1966 was a very, very, very big deal. And also, by the third season of the original series, you know, of course, season 3 wasn't nearly as good as seasons 1 or 2. And Fred Freiberger was not nearly as good as a producer as Gene Roddenberry and Gene Kuhn. But it was under Fred Freiberger's watch that Star Trek featured really strong female characters like Miramani, like the Romulan commander from the Enterprise incident, like Mara from Day of the Dove, like Natira of Yanada and For the World is Hollow When I Have Touched the Sky. Like, you know, there are a lot of strong female characters in the third season of the original series. Again, the very first woman to play a Klingon was in the original series. And I think that is, you know, that is definitely something to be commended. And Fred Freiberger made that happen. He made that happen.
I just want to see these characters, you know, who are strong actresses. And mind you, now we're in 1991. I don't think it was too much to ask for them to have a stronger presence or a stronger role. Yes, I know that Kirk, Spock, McCoy, I know those are our guys. I understand that. I acknowledge that. But we could give these strong female actresses more. And by 1991, even then, I would think we could do a little more in place.
Well, you know, everyone always says, "Oh, Janeway was the first woman to be a captain on Star Trek."
No,
she wasn't. She wasn't. Look at Star Trek 4.
Captain of the Saratoga.
Yeah, captain of the Saratoga. I'm blanking on her name, but she was also in Deep Space Nine. She was Sisko's wife, right? Isn't it the same actress who played?
I don't. Oh wait,
hold on. Now I'm going to go look it up.
It's first.
I might be wrong because my Star Trek encyclopedia is needs a reboot in my head right now.
Yeah,
but
I believe it was, but yeah.
Let me bring it up really quick. Madge Sinclair.
Madge Sinclair.
It's Madge Sinclair. No. Oh, wait. I'm scrolling here. No, she was not Sisko's wife.
Okay.
Wait. She's Geordi's mom.
Geordi's mom. I knew it was something. I knew it was something. I knew it was something. All right. I was close, but no cigar, but I was close. It was something like she came back in one of the later shows. She was Geordi's mom, and she was look, not only was a woman captain of the Saratoga, but a black woman was captain of the Saratoga in 1986.
In 1986.
You know, granted, you know, it was a small role, a small part, but she was great. I would absolutely like love to see a show featuring the captain of the Saratoga. I thought she was great.
I'm just a huge advocate for being a father of 2 daughters and being a huge Star Trek fan. I'm an advocate for more presence of women in Star Trek, and I love what Strange New Worlds is doing.
Strange New Worlds is excellent. Like first of all,
yes.
You know, Rebecca Romaine is, you know, has been fantastic.
And that finale of Strange New Worlds.
Celia Rose Gooding is
Celia Rose Gooding, yes.
And Christina Chong, right? She is fantastic. She is I think that's my favorite character of other than Price. I love she's my favorite character of Strange New Worlds.
They've hit it out of the park with that. And actually, what's interesting too is I think Strange New Worlds very much is this perfect amalgamation of everything we've learned. Like, as we've gone through Star Trek history, we've taken everything that works and put it all together in a series. Brennan and I have talked with each other, and we've reviewed a few episodes of Strange New Worlds on this show. We agree that right now, as I will say, as perfect kind of a cinematic blend as we could get has been Strange New Worlds. We have not really found a flaw that we've really just nitpicked at it. I love Strange New Worlds.
I did too.
And in that respect, we owe that respect to everything that has come before, including Star Trek 6, Star Trek 5, all the way back to the original series. We owe all of that. And Nichelle Nichols is the start of that. Nichelle Nichols, of course, Grace Lee Whitney, and Michelle Barrett, or
Majel Barrett.
Majel
Majel
Barrett, yeah.
Barrett.
Majel Barrett, we owe respect to
Oh,
her.
my favorite character in Strange New Worlds is Nurse Chapel, by the way.
Oh yeah.
She's
I gotta
fabulous.
say, the only thing I
Jenna
don't
Bush.
about
yeah.
Strange New Worlds is the guy who played Kirk, Paul Wesley,
Mm.
was weak. He was just weak.
He'll be back.
Okay.
He'll be back.
All right.
Oh,
Yeah.
but like when Chris Pine played Kirk in the JJ movies, he was
Mm.
he was
Yes.
excellent. If you're gonna play Kirk, you got to earn it, man.
Yep.
Well, that being said, otherwise though, I personally enjoy this film so much, and just the
I'm trying to
heart.
think if there's anything I don't like in it, and
It's really hard to like. This is a top tier Star Trek movie.
Yes,
I
it is.
used to think that the court scene was kind of dumb because I used to think that it was kind of dumb because I went, well, if they had done a more thorough investigation, until I realized something.
Yeah.
It wasn't about the investigation.
Nope.
The Federation was willing to say, screw you, Kirk, we're trying to pursue peace here,
Mhm.
but we're going to let them kangaroo court you.
Mhm.
Yeah, little interesting little commentary there.
Interesting. Yeah.
Absolutely, but
But otherwise, there really isn't anything I don't like about this stuff.
I love that the whole time too, as Spock is watching this trial, you see the wheels turning in his
He's
head.
thinking. He's thinking.
You know, he knows something else isn't right. This isn't right. We know what happened, and he's trying to still think of, we didn't fire, but we did. And he's going through that in his head, and that's what he's really paying attention.
Once you eliminate the impossible, whatever remains over improbable
Must be true.
must be the truth.
Anytime you quote Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, I approve.
The one thing about Star Trek 6, I thought Kim Cattrall was fantastic as Valeris. But of course, that character originally was supposed to be Savick.
We're supposed to see Savick, yes.
I'm so glad it's not.
See, I wish it was.
Really?
Oh.
I think it would have been, sure, if you love Savick and to see her betray the Federation, that would have sucked. But it would have been like,
Oh, she did see the Klingons kill David. It's true.
I don't know if you guys watched the remake of Battlestar Galactica.
I watched it a little bit.
But when Gaeta turns on Commander Adama after 4 years of loyalty, it was a really powerful moment. It was a powerful moment that really stuck out. The significance of that turn ran much deeper because it was a character that was respected and admired and storied, and she turned on Commander Adama. And I think if you had Savick turning on Spock, like, it just would have been an extremely shocking and very, very strong and powerful turn. Like, oh my God.
It would have made sense because she saw the Klingons murder David right in front of her.
Absolutely. That's very true. She saw it.
Yeah, but
only if they could have brought back Kirstie Alley. I mean, Robin Curtis was okay.
Yep.
Right. It would have been better with Kirstie Alley.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Well, obviously we could try and nitpick it, but we're not going to do that. We love it too much. I want to connect this to the greater Star Trek universe, and we've kind of touched on it a little bit here. In talking about, of course, the arc of Kirk, and leading into Generations. We've got the connections with Brock Peters and Renee Auberjonois.
And Michael Dorn.
And Michael Dorn, absolutely. Also, the connection to Star Trek Voyager and its 100th episode, bringing in Tuvok, which again, it's the greatest tragedy of all is I don't have could we just digitally put Tuvok in that image when the whole bridge crew
Do
is
a little
standing
bit
there?
of trials and tribulations.
Just a
That
little
would be
bit.
awesome. Yeah.
Just somebody go back in, add it in. I would be ever so grateful. Tim Russ would be he needs work right now. Okay, let's give Tim Russ some work.
That would
From
be
the
awesome.
desert, man.
That would be awesome.
Absolutely. I'm trying to see if there were other connections we've kind of built.
Well, there's a big one. There's a big one.
Go for it. Go for it.
A lasting peace between the Federation and the Klingons
Well, sure.
The
becomes
Khitomer
a
Accords.
major plot point in Next Gen and Deep Space Nine.
Mhm. Absolutely. This was the first on-screen use of Hikaru Sulu, the name Hikaru.
And James Tiberius Kirk.
Well, Tiberius was back in the animated series.
Oh, I did not know that. Okay.
Yeah, in the final episode of the animated series, the counterclock incident is where we first learned that Tiberius was Kirk's middle name.
But to hear Christopher Plummer say it, oh,
Yes. Right. Well, for sure. Yes. In terms
chills.
It was the animated episode Bem, which
Bem,
which established it as.
But to hear the way that Fang enunciates it, and I wonder if he's thinking very, the significance of that name. And now it has a storied history to it. Interesting little detail there. Also, we do see the Klingon courtroom again in Enterprise. It's yet again the Klingons doing their kangaroo trials. Oh boy.
Yeah, right.
Another fun tidbit that I absolutely love looking for this, because I'm a behind the scenes kind of guy. I absolutely love as we walk through the corridors of the Enterprise, how much they lawfully look like the Enterprise D.
Well, that's right. That's right.
Yeah, but again, both were going on at the same time, and saving money was really crucial. So when TNG was going on, they doubled up sets to save money pretty continuously. So the bridge is just a redo of the Enterprise D bridge. All the corridors are the same. In fact, though, what they do is they change the lighting and they change the angle at which you look at the corridors. In TNG, because of TV, it's a lot higher. Here, it's a lot lower, and that's to give you more of that still that submarine feeling that it's supposed to really evoke. And so they try with that combination of lighting and camera work to make it look like a completely different ship, but it is exactly the same as the Enterprise D.
Yep.
Just a little thing that I absolutely love. And of course, Michael Dorn. This is something I found out years ago that I had no idea about. Michael Dorn is actually credited as one of the individuals, or about 5 individuals, who have actually formalized and completed the Klingon language. Michael Dorn actually had a huge hand in this. I had How to Speak Klingon on CD, and it was narrated and established that Michael Dorn was one of those original.
And this is where we hear the most Klingon spoken in Star Trek.
There was actually no consistency through the movies in terms of the Klingon language, and it wasn't until the Next Generation years with Worf that actually became finalized. I did not know that.
Very interesting.
I also love the little detail. They never bring it up again in Star Trek, but the idea that the Klingons love Shakespeare translated into Klingon.
Yeah, it's the original Klingon version.
The original Klingon.
Wouldn't it be great to find out if would it be great to find out if that Shakespeare was actually just an augmented Klingon back in time?
Well, that would be a hell of an episode of Star Trek Strange
Guardian of Forever strikes again.
Yeah, the Guardian of Forever, right? Yeah, the Guardian of Forever.
I love it. All right, so what is our favorite moment, scene, quote from this film?
You guys go first.
Okay.
Ooh.
Brennan always. Good, then go first.
Oh my word, put me on the spot. I love the dinner scene. It feels like everybody's family dinners at the holidays. Where it's like, nobody bring up politics, please. And then, they get into an interesting little argument. But I just love that scene. because I think it encapsulates the tensions in this episode.
Absolutely it does.
And getting to see the historical parallels we're dealing with in that scene. Chang says, we need breathing room.
Earth, Hitler,
And
1938.
Kirk adroitly points out, who else said that? Also, David Warner is a treasure. I will always regret that I never got to meet him. My favorite role he ever played was in a voice role in a video game.
Oh,
David Warner played the villain, John Irenicus, in the 2000 video game Baldur's Gate 2 Shadows of On. Everything this guy touched, even if the movies were kind of terrible, he would always bring gravitas.
he was great as
His
Sark the
performance.
villain in Tron, and also
Yes.
he was Jack the Ripper in Time After Time. I mean, he's excellent. Yeah, I mean, he's one of the greats.
He was even in Star Trek 5, and I liked his character.
Yeah.
St. John Talbot. But yeah, there are a lot of connections to larger Star Trek here. But I think particularly this movie establishes the future of pretty much every Star Trek that has come after, in terms of the Kittimer Accords, in terms of the lasting peace, which is broken slightly in Deep Space Nine, and getting to see the Federation and the Klingons fight side by side in those big battle scenes in the Dominion War is extraordinary.
Sure. Yep. Great point.
And yeah, this movie is just it's really something special. It really is.
Favorite part. What do you pick from your favorite Star Trek movie? This is so difficult for me. I think I agree with you, the dinner scene, but the entire wit and back and forth between Kirk and Chang, and then just this back and forth, and the use of literary quotes, and how apt it all is. Once more unto the breach, quoting
There's a
Henry.
reason why 400 years later Shakespeare is still a big deal.
Absolutely. And it works here. It works so well. And I'm an English teacher in real life. The inclusion of Shakespeare into this touches me in such a way, because so much that we owe in the English language in literature now is due to Shakespeare. I can't discount that enough. Whether you believe he wrote it or not, I don't care. The result in the end is timeless and continues to push forward and inspire countless amounts of film and literature and poetry and music and everything. Even the language we speak today, a lot of phrases and turnabouts were created by Shakespeare. And so to have Shakespeare such an integral part of Star Trek, I mean, like, one of the earliest memories I have of Shakespeare and Star Trek is actually the episode in season 1 where Q is trying to recruit Riker, and Picard has the speech about what a piece of work is man. That blows my mind still, how they were able to take that and turn it and twist it. And then I believe it's 3 years later when we have this movie, 4 years, maybe 4 years, and to have such a heavy Shakespearean input is just fabulous. And it's not catchy, it's not hackneyed, it fits, it makes sense here, because we're talking about a brave new world, an undiscovered country that we're getting, and Shakespeare was all about trying new things. And so it fits in here, and there is a reason it's used. And this is it. It's just pure joy to me to hear all these quotes and yet to have them thematically fit.
Mm-hmm.
All right, Scott.
Shakespeare like you, I first realized who Shakespeare was because of Star Trek, because
Yes.
of Conscience of the King.
Conscience of the King.
And that's an episode that when I
The
was
plays the thing where, catch the conscience of the king.
absolutely. And that was an episode that when I was watching it when I was younger, I thought it was okay. But it like so many episodes, I grew to love them more and more as I grew up and
So
got
does the
older.
executioner.
Exactly. And Conscience of the King is one of my top 5 favorite episodes now because of the way that it's about Shakespeare and they reenact plays from Macbeth and Hamlet, but in the end, Kirk is Hamlet because he knows who the killer is, but he's not taking action yet. Just like Hamlet, he hesitated on taking action. But anyway, but the original series definitely a lot of love and appreciation and references. You have episode titles like By Any Other Name and Our Yesterdays and Dagger of the Mind. And in By Any Other Name, Kirk quotes the line, a rose by any other name from Romeo and Juliet would smell as sweet and crushes the flower. But look, I mean, my favorite scene in the film is the battle between the Enterprise and the Bird of Prey, and then Excelsior comes in and saves the day, and target that explosion and fire. And Kirk's like,
constant as the Northern Star.
Yeah, it's such a great.
I'd give him real money if he'd showed up.
But there's Chang just like quoting
a great line.
Shakespeare like left and right, and it works.
And it's Christopher Plummer.
I do have to put this out there. We alluded to this, but this is fact. 1956, both working for the Montreal Repertory Theater, and Plummer was playing Henry V, and who was his understudy?
William Shatner.
William Shatner.
Also in 1956, I think Forbidden Planet came out.
Yes. The Tempest.
Very big inspiration on Star Trek, and it's an adaptation of The Tempest.
The Tempest, yes.
So a lot of
Rebels now are ended.
A lot of love for Shakespeare in the world of Star Trek, for sure.
Rebels now are ended.
And that may be a podcast we do at one point, one of these days, one of these extras, where we talk about the influence of Shakespeare, and it really hits home. It does. It does. But yeah, so final thoughts of this film, Scott?
Well, listen, Star Trek VI has stood the test of time. It is an episode that's as relevant now in 2022 as it was in 1991 when it came out. The strengths, the depth of it, the performances, the finality of the original series crew, bringing everybody out on a high note and really sticking the landing by having everybody sign off during the ending credits. It is a worthy sense of closure for the original series crew. Thank goodness they went out on the high note that they did.
Brennan?
I don't know where to begin. This was, I explained before that the order in which I saw the Star Trek films was completely jumbled. This was probably the third Star Trek film I watched. And I think that it has stuck with me. The imagery of Burke and Samno in the EVA suits going on a shooting rampage is horrifying even to this day. I was watching it earlier today going, this scene is really scary. Those images like that just stick with you. And I just think that they end on such a high note. And I'm so glad they brought Nicholas Meyer back. I really am.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Because they needed a rejuvenation after Star Trek V, which I don't hate. But definitely this is a step up. And I think that I'm actually glad that this is a very on-the-nose political story. Because this is the story we absolutely needed then, and we need it now. And I think that it will always be relevant because, just like Shakespeare, it comments on the basics of human nature. This film is extraordinary. and I think is definitely one of the best Star Trek films.
I agree completely.
As a teacher, I'm always looking for different avenues to teach a subject. Always. And if I can ever have an excuse to show a Star Trek episode or movie in class, I will be the first one to use it.
Mhm.
I had an English teacher when I was in high school that used the Beowulf episode of Star Trek Voyager as a
Yes.
way to teach Beowulf.
Yes.
I loved it. It was the greatest thing. We were watching Star Trek in school,
I had a science teacher who used the episode Parallels
right?
Love that
to
one.
talk about quantum physics.
But though I'm an English teacher, if I was teaching history and we came to the point of talking about the Berlin Wall and the fall of communism, I would show this film without a question, because the parallels that Star Trek does, which has always been a strength of Star Trek, is being able to hit modern themes and audiences in a very prolific, perfect way without slapping you upside the head too hard. Except for Star Trek 4. We know the environmental message. We get it. I love Star Trek 4. But seriously, I would use this. This is perfect for my students because you get that human element. You aren't too far behind. And even if these kids today had no idea who Kirk and Spock were, that doesn't matter. This film is so good at giving you the idea of what the characters are about, who they are, kind of what's come before, without being so insulting about it.
And what Star Trek is.
And
at
what
its
Star
core.
Trek is. Absolutely. It is a beautiful film. And it would be absolutely acceptable for me to show this in class. And in fact, I think I'm going to find a way for this to happen because
Yeah.
I
Make it
just wanted
happen,
to-
Chris.
I want another excuse
Make
to
it
watch Star
so.
Trek. But Scott, I want to thank you so much because your knowledge is valued in our circle, very much so. And you and I spoke a
I
year
have to
ago.
ask one question though.
Oh, go ahead, Brennan.
Did you see this on opening day, Scott?
I sure did. I saw it before opening day. I went to a press screening, but then actually when it opened, I'm sorry, it was December 6th, 1991, not December 7th. December 7th is when Star Trek the Motion Picture opened. So when Star Trek 6 opened on December 6th, I was in Sacramento, California. I was working for Creation, and that weekend they did a Star Trek convention with William Shatner and Leonard Nimoy. So I was in Sacramento when I actually saw it in theaters with like other fans. But the first time I saw the movie was the week before at a press screening, and was the first press screening I ever went to. But it was also the first Star Trek movie I ever saw before it opened.
Nice. Thank you.
That is awesome. I lost my train of thought now about how awesome Scott Mantz is.
Oh,
No, it was, I will tell you, Scott, it was a year ago that you and I first spoke at the Schmodown Spectacular. And if you remember, I talked about this idea and I said, Scott, I got to get you on my podcast. He's like, you were like, this is a great idea, Chris. We should hook up sometime. Message me. We'll see what we're doing. A year later, here you are.
Here we are, the Schmodown, the Spectacular. Oh, yeah.
We did. We met during the halftime. If you briefly remember, I was so excited. I was like, the greatest thing ever. I sat front row center and I got to meet everybody. But my greatest thrill was like, I met Scott Mantz.
I was so sad.
That was a thrill for me too. Thanks for having me on. This has really been a lot of fun.
I was so sad I was not able to attend.
And now we have confirmed, you have said it, we'll work it in the schedule, but you're going to be back with us when we look at Star Trek 09.
I love Star Trek. I love all three of those movies, even Into Darkness, which I think it's attacked unfairly.
It's got its problems, but
I still love it.
Yeah.
I still love it because I love the characters and I love the actors playing them.
I love Benedict Cumberbatch so much in that, really.
Star Trek 2009 is awesome. And of those three movies, Star Trek Beyond is actually the one that feels the most like an actual Star Trek.
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
There you go.
Like,
Well, do we have to keep blowing up the Enterprise? Could somebody stop, please, blowing up the Enterprise?
I know. No more blowing up the Enterprise. I don't know. We gotta get the band back together for another Kelvin Timeline Enterprise movie.
Somebody get on this. Scott, let's work on this. But Scott, of course, this is your chance to shine. What are you working on right now?
Well, listen, the thing that, I mean, I'm going to preach to the choir when I say this, but Enterprise Incidents, the podcast I've been doing with Steve Morris, our deep dive episode by episode into the original series in production order, has been the most rewarding thing I ever was able to do because of the way we were able to link these original series episodes, tie them together, see a through line, see arcs to the characters and the themes that they discovered. And even I learned things about the making of the original show that I did not know. But the fact that that Enterprise Incidents has made me love Star Trek even more. I am so proud of what Steve and I have done with the original series on Enterprise Incidents. So for everybody listening, obviously you must be a Star Trek fan if you've been listening to this long. And if you please check out Enterprise Incidents with Scott and Steve, it's on Apple Podcasts, it's on Google Podcasts, it's on Spotify, it's on YouTube. Check out Enterprise Incidents with Scott and Steve, and you will get the Star Trek podcast and all Star Trek podcasts on the original series. And we're wrapping up the original series right now, but these episodes are evergreen. So whether it's now or 6 months from now or 6 years from now, the episodes are going to be just as urgent and it's just as valid. And then we're going to continue on after we're done with the original series, because the animated series is canon. You have many of the same writers, the same producers. Dorothy Fontana was the story editor. You have the same actors voicing the characters. And again, like you pointed out, Chris, it was in BEM that we learned that Kirk's middle name is Tiberius. So that makes it canon. So we are going to move forward with the animated series. And then after that, we're going to do the movies. Even though we already did a couple movies on the Cinephiles, I have some ideas on how to do those movies again by bringing in special guests. And as you know, since you've been listening, we've gotten some really great guests on the original show. So I think
I cannot wait to find out your next guest.
Oh my God, you're going to flip your wig. You're going to flip when you hear who our special guest is for all our yesterdays.
Oh, I can't wait. Well, I've never done this before, but I have to take advantage while I have. I'm also an amateur Schmodown writer.
Okay.
And so I have to throw one Star Trek 5-pointer at you.
Okay, let's hear it.
All right.
All
right, this will be fun. Yes. I might have shown you this one, Brennan, but we'll try this.
Okay.
What type of radiation was the Sona collector designed to take from the Baku planet in Star Trek Insurrection?
Oh, I think I know this one.
Stumped. I have no idea, dude. I saw Star Trek Insurrection 3 times. Not one of my favorites.
Brennan, what is it?
I think it's metaphasic radiation.
It is metaphasic radiation.
Way to go, Brennan.
Yeah, well, I mean, I have a Star Wars belt. I don't have a Star Trek belt, but you know.
There should have been a Star Trek belt. There are more Star Trek movies than Star Wars movies.
Yes, there are.
Although
Yes,
Scott
that's
Mantz
true,
would have
that's true.
never let go of that belt. I'm just telling you. Anyway, but again, thank you so much to Scott Mantz. We really appreciate your time, your wisdom. There's a reason that you're the president of our federation.
Oh, thank you, pal.
And we appreciate it. But next week we come back with the randomizer, and it's taking us to the Delta Quadrant.
Oh,
That's
yeah.
right. We're going to season 2 of Star Trek Voyager, episode 22, Innocence. This is the one where Tuvok crash lands on a planet and meets children who are horrified. And we get to find out why they're horrified. It's a pretty...
And then the week after that, you've already told me, but we'll save that.
I did. I have
later.
a surprise for the week after that, but we're going into the Christmas season. So, you know, it's a season to give. And boy, will we be giving during the month of December. Brennan, where can the people find you?
You can find me on Twitter. Yes, on Twitter. At Brennan Mystical Mar. You can also follow our podcast on Twitter at PageTurners_pod. You can follow me on Instagram at Brennan Blue. On Facebook at Brennan Mar. On Hive at Brennan Mar. That's a new one. And you can also find my link tree on my Twitter page that will take you to all my various adventures and misadventures. And I just gotta say, Scott, this has been the best conversation we have ever had on this podcast. And I mean that. This has been amazing.
Thank you, Brandon.
We thought really hard when we wanted a guest, and we were saving you. We were like, we got to wait to ask Scott. We got to have a good one to ask Scott. And I'm so glad you joined us for Star Trek 6. And you will join us at the end of looks like the end of April for a discussion of Star Trek 09. We got time.
We got time, but I can't wait.
Nothing.
And gentlemen, thank you so much for having me on. This conversation was one for the books.
Awesome. But as always, we end every episode. Qapla', and live long and prosper.
Peace and long life, and second star to the right, and straight on till morning.
Until morning.